Again, welcome everyone. It's such a pleasure to have you all joining us today. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Sorry if you see me looking to the side. It's just my sharing screen. Here it is. So we're going to start again. We haven't finished yet. We're just starting. So here we are. This is our module 3 session. So welcome everyone. And today we're going to work on exploring inclusion and working with power. Two key themes, topics, and one of our key principles under effective collaborative action. And just to reiterate a little bit the rules of engagement and how we engage in this space, how we invite you to show up and learn, to also express yourself. So feel free to open your mic, use the Bahasa interpretation that we have live. If you feel more comfortable speaking in Bahasa and sharing, please do so, and the interpreter will help us translate right away. Also, please keep your cameras on for as much as you can. And as we always say, we are focusing not only on the ideas, but also how to apply this to our day-to-day work at a landscape level. So there are a few practical exercises focusing on this, and it is an ongoing journey. There's only so much we can do in 2 hours, but hopefully these 2 hours are the place and the time in which we set up the basic interest and the basic understanding, so that you can continue applying the ideas and the learnings throughout the rest of the time in between modules. Now, a quick poll, and please, Alex, if you can help us copying the links and the references. We would love to hear from which landscape team you're joining us and on which device are you connecting to this session, if you're using a laptop or if you're using a phone, so that we can also help in facilitating and making it easier for you to navigate through the session. So let's see who's joining. And let's look at the results live. Excellent. We have some people from Diameter, GIZ, Swiss Contact. We obviously have some people from the UNDP team. Fantastic. Excellent. We have a very equal split, apparently. Oh, there you go. Excellent. So we have different people from different amounts of people from different landscape teams. And as we said, the second question that follows, and please keep on bringing in your responses if you haven't done so yet, is from which device are you connecting today? Are you connecting from a laptop? Are you connecting from your phone or a tablet or other devices? So that we know, and also bear this in mind for the breakout group session. Excellent. So we have some people from Diameter and GIZ joining on their mobile phones. And then from Swiss Contact and UNDP team, and someone that we don't know which landscape they're part of. We have most people joining from laptops, which is great. And we would definitely try as much as possible. And we know there are some limitations, but to try to encourage people to join using their laptops. So yeah, excellent. And let's go back to our slides now. And thank you for providing your input on which landscape team you're joining us from and which device you are connecting to. We're going to do a quick recap, and I'm going to ask you to please raise your hand, your Zoom hand, if you managed to join the past session, please. So I was here last time. Who else was here? Who else managed to join? Fantastic. So we have a bunch of people that did join. Excellent. I think some of the other people that are connected also joined. So feel free to, again, raise your hand on Zoom. Excellent. So for those of you who haven't joined, let us, and for those who joined as well, because it took it was a month ago or 3 weeks ago. So we are coming from 2 previous sessions, 2 ECA lab sessions. On the first session, we did an introduction, and we focused on these ideas of strength-based culture. How do we bring the notion of strength-based and appreciation to what we already have, and this idea of going from what's wrong to what's strong, to a multi-stakeholder collaborative processes and the work that we do at the landscape level. We talked about collaboration from a systems perspective and what that means. And we walked through the ECA components. You might recall we talked about the 4 building blocks, the essential practices, and the 10 key principles. And we started applying ECA to our landscape work. On the session 2, we focused on defining what is good collaboration. We looked at the CALM model, the acronym, you might recall, the 4 agendas for collaborative innovation. What gets in the way of effective collaboration, and how do we identify and document progress using the 10 key principles of ECA, the limiting conditions, and the signals of change. And we are going to have a separate session for each landscape on signals of change. So we are going to have a specific time to focus and zoom in much more in detail on those shortly. So this is where we're coming from, and we captured some feedback, and I'm conscious that you might not be able to read the slide because there's a lot of information, but I will just basically walk you through the key ideas of the feedback that we collected. And so we recognized and gathered that from last session, you learned, you gained some insights around the weaknesses of your teams and connections to landscape. This is part of the feedback that was gathered from you, exploring the limiting conditions of the multi-stakeholder collaboration and the space for that in your landscape team, at your landscape level. And there was some interest in the signals of change session for each landscape. The CALM model was quite regarded and valued. So for those of you who didn't manage to join, maybe it's a good idea to go through those materials whenever you have the time. Other people shared that connectivity and connection is key, so they took back that idea for their work on the ground. In terms of enjoying the interaction with other consortium members and the general sessions on breakout groups, and someone mentioned that it was really good to use the one slide, Google slide that we could all chip in, and described it as interestingly chaotic, which I found really, really nice, really beautiful. And what would you like more of tools, examples, and sharing knowledge with each other. So hopefully we can tackle that during the check-in sessions where we mix people from different landscape teams. And with the ECA ambassadors, we discussed some additional points around inviting ECA ambassadors from each of your landscape teams to facilitate more. And we are going to do so today, actually during the breakout groups, just to very informally invite you to kind of moderate the conversation or articulate the conversation. Obviously with the help of one of our colleagues from the global UNDP team and Iburini as well. We are in the process of organizing the signals of change sessions, and we also gathered some key insights around sharing the materials beforehand, translated to Bahasa, so that people can have a look at them before each session. So yeah, please feel free to delete your hand raising. I'm not sure if I can do that for everyone, or maybe Alex, if you can have a look and see if we can lower everyone's hands in case anyone wants to say something, we can recognize that. Thank you so much. So yeah, so this is in a nutshell some of the insights and feedback that we gathered. Feel free to type anything else on the chat that you feel might be relevant to capture from last module. And we are constantly looking at ways of continuously improving these sessions and making them as relevant and useful to you as possible. So your feedback is really appreciated. And for today, we're going to spend the last 10 minutes gathering your input as well on this specific session, so that we make sure we have as much information as possible. Thank you, Alex, for sharing on the chat. So I'm going to go very briefly through the comments on the chat. Please confirm your attendance on the form that Courtney has shared. It's really, really important for us to be able to track track your attendance. And thank you, Iburini, for sharing the translation on these. And also, please don't forget to join the digital platform group, the SLPI digital platform group, because we are going to save all of the resources there. So yeah, that's it from my side on the reminders, but feel free to chip in on the chat if you have any additional points or questions around previous session. And now enough of me talking. I would like to pass it on to each one of the landscape teams to briefly just share, as we did last time, taking this step back and balcony view. And I know that weeks pass by really quickly and we're all super busy. That's why it's really important to kind of take a step back, pause, and check how did the learning continue from last session, and what actions did you and your team take to continue the learning, and maybe think of what commitments or what commitment is needed from you to make sure that there's a continuum between these 2-hour sessions and applying the ideas and concepts on the ground. So yeah, if I can ask one person from each landscape to briefly share on these points, that would be fantastic. Who would like to start? Shall I invite people, maybe? I'm happy to do so. So let's start with Teuku. Teuku, are you happy to share from Swiss Contact side? Thank you.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Sole, for the opportunity. Yeah, we are happy to learn new things and new learnings from the past two workshop sessions, and we had a chance to sit together, but not the whole team, but some part of the team, and discussing the past two workshop. And but we were discussing about how we will apply this workshop to our landscape, but maybe not at the soonest time, because we are still waiting for the, I think, the fifth and sixth sessions that discussing the concrete actions and the help from UNDP for the landscape. So until that time, we are happy to continue the learning, and while we are planning what we have to do, what we can adopt. I think that's from my side. Uh, Still mute, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Teuku. And yes, I think the signals of change exercise with each landscape will be a key opportunity to start translating this into concrete actions that you can take moving forward as well. So thank you for bringing that up. Anyone that would like to share from diameter?
Okay, I'll take the honor. I think with the two ambassadors, which I cannot attend. I think it was one of the important things in relation to what we have been discussing here is sort of again linked to the signals of change, where at the moment within the landscape, as it has the program has been running now for 3 years, and we had initial sort of assessments on sort of looking at who are the stakeholders, what are the key issues, and developing a program. And now at the stage that we sort of want to understand what has been the impact, what has been the change. So it's very, I think, valuable. We have started to do some actions on the ground, and I think also because of that, sort of the interest in also having the more concentrated discussion, because at the moment it's quite a big team, and as you also said, it's very sometimes difficult to find time together. And actually, this learning exercise can be a nice opportunity. Had to sort of force ourselves and sit down and more in depth talk about it, and also think about it, like what are positive signs, which are things that we can further develop, and maybe develop new actions as well. I had to take this forward.
Yes, thank you, Godwin, for sharing. And indeed, I think the exercise on signals of change is quite helpful in bringing that anchor in a way. So yeah, we're really looking forward to organizing those, and ECA team leads and ambassadors will receive an email most likely this week with further information on this. Thank you very much. And I think, yeah, GIZ, anyone from GIZ that would like to share? Not sure, Mbafebri, if you are able to connect, and yeah, I can hear someone opening their mic. Oh, Denny, yes, please go ahead. Very nice to see you.
Yeah, I don't know. It should be on the English, or I can speak in Indonesia.
You can speak in Bahasa if you want to. Yeah, definitely. And we have an interpreter, so please go ahead.
Oke, baik. Saya akan menggunakan bahasa Indonesia karena mungkin itu lebih mudah buat saya memastikan bahwa yang saya sampaikan adalah benar seperti itu. Karena cukup sulit juga untuk mencoba menggunakan bahasa Inggris meskipun sebenarnya ada juga teman-teman yang nanti akan bisa menambahkan dengan menggunakan bahasa Inggris. Baik, untuk saat ini di tim kami, di lanskap kami itu terakhir sebenarnya mencoba mempraktekkan dari beberapa teori ataupun latihan yang sudah dijalankan oleh yang juga kami dapatkan di ECA Lab Series sebenarnya. Jadi waktu itu kami mencoba mempraktekkan di tingkat lokakarya atau workshop untuk kerjasama memulai kerjasama atau kick off meeting di landscape kami di Kutai Timur, di mana kami melibatkan uh, hampir semua key aktor, baik itu dari pemerintah, swasta, bank, bahkan juga petani hingga sampai koperasi untuk bersama-sama merancang bagaimana atau proyek kerjasama dari Sustainku Team ini yang akan dilaksanakan di Kutai Timur. Itu adalah update sekurang-kurangnya dari kami. Nah, di dalamnya kami membahas mengenai beberapa hasil dari kerjasama yang kira-kira akan muncul ketika proses-proses dari kerjasama ini dijalankan. Di antaranya adalah tentu saja seperti peningkatan kapasitas petani akan dijalankan, akan munculnya beberapa aturan-aturan baru yang mungkin dibutuhkan oleh terutama pemerintah dalam mencapai keberlanjutan. Nah, sehingga sebegitu kompleksnya proses tersebut, kami berusaha memastikan latihan yang kami dapat dari ECA Lab Series ini untuk bisa dijalankan. Beberapa praktek diantaranya adalah meminta pendapat berbagai key actor tersebut dengan menggunakan modul yang ada, dan mungkin itu juga nanti akan bisa ditambahkan oleh Mbak Febri, karena Mbak Febri yang memfasilitasi proses dari penggunaan modul-modul dari ECA Learning itu. Dan kemudian jika pertanyaan terkait kira-kira komitmen apa yang diperlukan lagi, nah saat ini tentu kami berharap komitmennya bisa datang dari beberapa key actor itu, supaya bisa menjalankan paling tidak mungkin untuk memastikan bahwa kolaborasi dari seluruh key actor itu bisa berjalan dengan baik dan lagi-lagi bersepakat untuk menghasilkan sesuatu yang sudah disepakati dalam lokakarya itu. Paling tidak dari kami saat ini prosesnya baru itu kira-kira dari penggunaan modul-modul dari learning lab series ECA ini. Nah, semoga ini bisa membawa sesuatu hal. Lagi-lagi ini tentu semua orang bilang bahwa ini adalah sesuatu hal yang baru. Namun juga kita bisa bilang bahwa sebenarnya juga lama, hanya saja mungkin dari sisi prakteknya kami baru mengetahui caranya melalui atau cara yang benar paling tidak melalui dari lab series pelatihan ini. Saya mungkin perlu juga second opinion dari teman-teman TAL jika ada hadir di sini untuk bisa menambahkan. Saya persilakan.
Thank you, Mas Denny. If I may add some point to Mas Denny's recap. Yes, last 2 weeks we didn't join this ECA Learning Lab because all of us was held a kick-off workshop. It's a co-creation planning to operationalize the Sustainku Team program. And then we intentionally designed the workshop with some principle from the ECA. And also we apply some tools and method like word cafe and then the check-in method. So we make sure that the engagement and also participation from all stakeholders is all in the room. And also we had a good feedback from the participants that they all feel this is the first time they join the workshop that feels like not too formal, but we can feel safe to voice the opinion and also to give opinion of the planning session. So I think that's a good start. So our commitment to make sure that the learning from the ECA lab is applied in our landscape is to maybe to practice or to apply all methods or all tools from the learning lab in our landscape. So we have to intentionally design all the meeting, all the workshop, and all the session with various participants using the ECA method. I think that's all that I can at some point from Mas Denny. Back to you, Soleh. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mas Denny, for sharing your insights. It was super clear. And as I said on the chat, very powerful to hear your experience of applying what you've heard and learned and how you see the journey also continuing. And thank you, Febri, as well. I think it would be amazing to capture much more details of the learnings that you've gathered from this workshop. So we might connect bilaterally with you and with a group of your landscape team to do that. It's really powerful to have this possibility of hear from you and share with the rest of the landscape teams. Thank you, Courtney. A good reminder for those of you who have just joined recently to please add your names on the form where we are tracking attendance to make sure that we capture that you've joined today. And thank you everyone for sharing where you're at and where you're going. I think this section is really inspiring in that sense because we get to hear what each landscape's been up to, and that's great. I take it that, I mean, when we did the poll, we didn't have anyone from Caleka, but is that still the case, or has someone from Caleka landscape team joined recently? I think it's still the case, right? Okay, just wanted to make sure in case there was someone that could share on behalf of the landscape team. If there's someone from Caleka joining, please do raise your hand or add, let us know on the chat, and we will make some time for you to share what your landscape team's been up to. Today, then, we're going to focus on inclusion and working with power as a key principle for effective collaborative action. And you might remember that we focused on this key principle together with building a safe collective space last time during module 2, when we looked at signals of change. And we will share that one slide again on what gets in the way of good collaboration and what are the ways in which we can identify change. So as a reminder, but today we're going to go through some of the key ideas, applying them to our landscape work, and following up. Yeah, we are going to also touch base with you on a potential power analysis session with a power expert for each landscape. So as you can see, after each module, we are trying to link each module with a potential follow-up from UNDP support, to Teuku's point as well on, you know, how do all of these links to the support that UNDP can provide to each landscape. So exploring inclusion and exclusion, and today's check-in is about exploring inclusion and exclusion from our own experience and perspective, as we normally do. And for that, we're bringing in this, what we called the diversity iceberg, which is just a visual representation that when we talk about diversity, we refer to all the ways in which people are different. And sometimes if we don't intentionally think of diversity and inclusion in that sense, we might tend to focus on the traits, the personal traits that we can see, like skin color, race, age, potentially nationality, sometimes gender identity, social status, sometimes religion even. But actually diversity makes not only for what we can see from someone, but also the personality traits, experience, characteristics, ways of thinking, learning style, a lot of other things that makes us who we are. And the invitation is to think about inclusion in those terms. And when we think about multi-stakeholder collaborative processes as well, we might tend to think that certain settings or design is inclusive because, let's say, we are inviting representatives from different groups to join that space. And that is kind of staying at the waterline of visibility, right? Because under the waterline of visibility, there might be power dynamics, there might be cultural nuances that shape the way in which those different individuals and groups can participate or cannot participate during those sessions. So, you know, trying to think of inclusivity in the context of multi-stakeholder collaborative processes also in that sense of what stays above the waterline of visibility and what is under it. But let's go back to our personal experience and today's check-in in pairs. The idea is to invite you to think about any positive or negative experience that you might have had because of your own diversity, obviously to the extent that you are comfortable sharing. So think of any time in which you felt different or you felt that actually you were very well included or that you felt excluded. And so how did that experience look like? How did that make you feel? And what was the, what were the traits that made you feel included or excluded? That's a little bit the prompt for today. Alex, thank you for copying the questions on the chat. We're going to take 4 minutes each to share in pairs. And remember, when someone is sharing, please use deep listening. So just take in what the person is sharing. And then in 4 minutes, you can change roles. And then we will come back to plenary. Thank you, Courtney, for sending us to the breakout rooms, and Alex for sharing the questions. I'm going to leave this on. I think we have only a few people left on the breakout groups. Shall we close them?
It is closed, so that we're joining back.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone. And it would be great to hear, well, to read some of the insights of things that emerged during those check-ins as, you know, ideas, learnings, or what resonated with you in terms of what was shared, obviously with the care and confidentiality that we manage in this kind of spaces, without sharing any details of any personal experience if it's not the purpose of it, but just, you know, what resonated with you. If you can share it on the chat, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. And now, in terms of inclusion, I just wanted to share this model, which is called the DOTS model. I think, again, it's quite visual in terms of working through our understanding of what inclusion means and doesn't mean, and the different ways in which sometimes inclusion might show up, or misleading ways, in a way that we might think we're doing inclusion, but actually not necessarily. So we said that diversity is about understanding and valuing all of the different differences of each individual, and not just what we can see above the waterline of visibility. And then inclusion, one definition of inclusion is a space where differences are valued. So where those differences, the ones that we can see and the ones that we cannot see, are valued. And our aim in the work that we do is to create multi-stakeholder spaces where people feel involved, respected, connected, and hopefully that brings in the richness of ideas and backgrounds and perspectives to create value and the change that we want to see and that we need. So this model from Friendship Circle provides, I think, a very helpful visual of the difference between true inclusion and different ways of exclusion or marginalization that can create this idea of in and out groups, right? So just to share very briefly some of the definitions, you can see that we have on the lower layer, we have exclusion, which is basically, you can see the circle, the green circle, which is the in group, and then different colored dots showing how different individuals are literally out of that circle, out of that group. And that's exclusion in a way, how exclusion is represented. So individuals are outside and they are not part of the main group. Then we have what's called segregation, which is when we have a subgroup that exists outside of the main group. And this is the typical us versus them situation. And there's mutual exclusion because, as you can see, different people form their own group separate from the main group. Yeah. Then we have integration. And this is where this idea of inclusion can become interesting to look into more detail, you know, zoom in and really think, are we being truly inclusive? So integration is when the main group accepts another group, but they still stay as a subgroup within that main group. Yeah. So and we are going to reflect on how could this look like on a multi-stakeholder process. And you know, some examples are when farmer groups are invited to multi-stakeholder collaborative events, but they're still organized and in a way they're invited, but they are concentrated in themselves in a separate group from the rest of their group, and they're not integrated to people from other groups. And this is the same for, you know, government officials or private sector. So each subgroup forms their own group within the collaborative process, but they're not really including each other or talking to each other or are connecting with each other, which is obviously inclusion, as you can see on the top circle, what true inclusion means in a way, where individuals are freely included. All individuals are somehow equal within a shared environment, and they maintain their own color. As you can see, in inclusion, we have the green color, the green dots, but we also have the different color dots, trying to represent that we can keep our own diversity traits, that we can show up in our own diversity. And then another example, which I think is very powerful, of ways in which we might confuse inclusion with something else is assimilation. So assimilation is sometimes mistaken for inclusion, and this reflects a situation where people lose their difference, and therefore the value that they can bring from those differences, and seek to blend in the prevailing culture of that space, you know. In a multi-stakeholder process, that would mean that each stakeholder group and individual, instead of bringing their own insights and perspectives from their own experience, they just come and basically join in a somehow melted group of same rules, and you know, everything remains on the surface, and this diverse exchange is not allowed in a way. So yeah, these are different ways in which inclusion can show up and not show up, and exclusion can show up and not show up, and some ways in which we might confuse the practice of inclusion when actually we're not necessarily being inclusive. Now, thinking of all of these ideas without necessarily having to remember the difference and the terms between inclusion, exclusion, segregation, you are going to get these materials anyways. But the invitation before we go to a break is to have some collective reflection on when we think about, sorry, I'm just closing here so that we can all see there. When we think about this, there are different ways of including and excluding people from our own landscapes. When we think about these different ways of exclusion and inclusion and how they might show up in your work, what examples come to mind? How do you think exclusion and inclusion might show up at your landscape level? And we're going to also look at, you know, what are the risks of that and what are the opportunities. And so we're going to open a Mentimeter for that. We're not going to do the one PowerPoint slide today, but we're still going to do the Mentimeter so that hopefully everyone can provide their insights on a written form, which might be helpful and easier for some of our colleagues today. I'm gonna go to Mentimeter now. And share my screen on that next poll. So let's go and start gathering some insights before we go on a 5-minute break. So as I said, the question is, how do these different ways of inclusion or exclusion might show up in your work with the landscape stakeholders? Again, you don't need to remember the concepts or the exact terminology, but just think of, you know, when you look at your landscape, how is inclusion or exclusion showing up, or how do you envision that that could happen? What are the ways in which people could be feeling included or excluded? And please join the Mentimeter using either the link that Alex shared, or you can also type menti.com and the code, or use the QR code from the presentation, which you cannot see right now. So I think the link will work better. Integration, yeah, definitely. How do you see, I mean, if anyone that typed that is happy to share out loud while we gather all inputs, also feel free to open your mic and share. How do you see integration happening at your landscape, at your particular landscape? We have that it is relatable, the multi-stakeholder in the initial phase is segregation or exclusion, and along the way it goes towards inclusion, or at least multiple ways of integration, yeah? We have to know all the interests and synergize interests, definitely. The idea of synergizing interests is actually quite powerful, because as you might recall, when we talk about effective collaborative action, one of the building blocks is about co-creating the approach. So bringing people together into a shared vision and what unites them. Different ways of how they communicate, their communicate needs and opinion, definitely. That is a very strong way of including or excluding people. Feel free also to type in Bahasa if you feel more comfortable. You don't need to only do it in English. Have a multi-stakeholder meeting, workshop, and training. For some people, it's a first-time experience, so it's not easy to trust each other. That's a fantastic insight. And many times when we organize multi-stakeholder events, we in the preparation to those events, we strongly encourage people to approach different stakeholders and different stakeholder groups and do this preparation work. You know, how do you lay the ground as you would do with the soil, right? How do you prepare the soil so that the seeds can actually be planted? So this is a very, very important part of any multi-stakeholder collaborative process. How do you brief people beforehand? How do you create the enabling conditions for people to feel included when they arrive? Exclusion of control to land, very important. Yeah, so there's an somehow a competition for resources that will bring some exclusion energy in a way. Co-sharing of program goals may trigger integration, definitely, this co-creation of the approach. Power to influence others, we are going to talk about, and that's why interesting, right? Inclusion and working with power go hand in hand. Intrigue is a stumbling block, yes. So what's being said and not said, the hidden agendas, and how in multi-stakeholder processes there are actors that tend to work exclusively with each other, definitely. Open and safe space for multi-stakeholders to have genuine dialogues might not be in place yet. And this goes back to the limiting conditions, right? What are the limiting conditions? What's getting in the way of good collaboration? We have a comment in Bahasa. Ibu Rini, would you like to maybe address it if you're able to? Ibu Rini, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Perlu persamaan persepsi terhadap capaian besar dari semua pemangku kepentingan. So he or she said that it needs the mutual understanding and also a common perception views from all the stakeholders. Yeah.
Excellent. Definitely. Thank you. It's and again, a lot of that, if we feel that the multi-stakeholder space, the physical space where people are coming together, or the official space where people are coming together might not be conducive to that, there are alternative ways of addressing that in the preparation or outside of that space. So when we think about multi-stakeholder processes and inclusion and working with power, one of the biggest invitations that we do is to see the multi-stakeholder process as a continuum and not just the event or the moment in which people get together, but actually everything else that happens before, during, and after. We're going to leave it here for this Mentimeter because we are going to address risks and actions in the second phase of this workshop. And Given it's 5 past the hour, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Please don't disconnect your call. Just leave your Zoom connected. Turn off your camera and mute yourself. Stretch your legs, and we'll see you back in 10 past the hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Sole.
But yeah, to begin with, we're going to go through the key ideas around working with power. And hopefully some of you had the chance to go through the videos that we shared. If you haven't had the chance, we would really suggest that you do so at some point, because these videos are helping us navigate through the content in a sort of self-paced. You can look at them as much as you want, many times. There's also subtitles that you can add so that you can have the subtitles to Bahasa. So yeah, it kind of helps with bringing some agility to the session and spending more time in the exchange and applying the work to the landscape than, you know, spending a lot of time going through theory. But you might recall from last session that we talked about the 10 key principles, and one of them was inclusion and working with power. And we went through the flow of, you know, for each key principle, what gets in the way of collaboration. And this is what we call the limiting conditions. Then we looked at examples of tools and practices that can help us advance. So how can we move forward? What are examples of signals of change? So how do we know that change is happening? How do we notice that? And then how do we adapt to our own context by identifying our own limiting conditions and our own signals of change? I'm not going to go into the details of this, but just to say that inclusion and working with power was one of the key principles or key areas of work that was prioritized by all landscapes in the needs assessment, and also during the prioritization of principles that we did last session. And we are going to go much more into the details of this, as I said, during the signals of change exercise. That's why it's so relevant today to build some of our understanding behind these concepts so that we can apply them later on when we go into the details of the landscape work. The videos show and go much more into the details of what it means to work with power in the context of multi-stakeholder collaborative processes. This is a quick recap. We talk about 3 key ideas. The first one being that power is neither good nor bad. There are just different forms of power. And in order to do anything, to act in the world, you need power, you know, whether that's power as in physical power and energy, mental power, psychological power. The big question is, how is that power used in relation to others? Yeah. And we're going to go through some of the ways in which we can see that manifesting. The other key idea is that working with power starts with ourselves. And there is a very strong connection between how we see the world, how we've experienced the world, and how we show up in the way that we exercise our own power. Yeah. So understanding how we experience power is very important, not only from a self-development perspective, but also in the way that we see power outside, the way that we understand the power dynamics, what's going on, how we interpret other people's actions, and how we direct ourselves to others. There are theories around, you know, if we've lived in oppressive spaces, we might tend to exercise oppression on others when we have the opportunity to do so. And all of these processes are very unconscious. We're not aware of them necessarily. We don't do it on purpose. We're not necessarily being intentional about it. It's just happening because that's part of our own experiences and how we've been shaped by the life that we've lived. So bringing attention and awareness to this is really key. And then the third key idea is that facilitating collaboration is mostly about navigating through power dynamics. And this is the when we work with groups, we talk that 80% of the work is about understanding power dynamics and working through them. And also 80% of this work happens before any kind of multi-stakeholder collaboration or event takes place. It happens in the way that we connect with different stakeholders, in the way that we create that enabling environment and safe collective space for people to show up when the time comes. As I said, strongly recommend you go through the videos. Nicola is sharing the key ideas much more in depth in those videos, and I find it super interesting. So really suggest you go through that pre-work that we shared before. In terms of how power manifests, we said, power just is. It's not good or bad. It just is. And it shows up, it expresses itself in different ways. And this is where we might add a value to it, whether, it's good or bad. And this is one of many models that show how power manifests and different expressions of power. Power two, so the individual ability to act. And what does that mean in practice? Well, it means that we, as individuals, have the power to make a difference, yeah? And that manifests in the way that we act, in how we show up, how we participate. And yeah, there are obviously spaces that allow us to exercise our power to more or less. Power with is about collective action and the ability to act together. And this is what helps build bridges across different interests, experiences, knowledge. What we talk about this co-creating the approach, taking collaborative action in terms of effective collaborative action words. Power within, individual or collective sense of self-worth, value, and dignity. This is the power that comes from within ourselves, and how we feel we have the capacity to visualize, to empower ourselves, to grant ourselves space in a certain collective, and through life in general. It's that sense of essence and how we of purpose, right, of calling, all of these very interesting inward looking things. And then it's power over, which is often seen as negative and a coercive expression of power. And this is understood as the domination or control over one person, group, or institution over another. But what I find very interesting about these different ways of expressing power is that when we talk about power, we have this negative assumption around it. Yet out of all of these 4 expressions of power, 3 have very positive connotations and only 1 has a negative connotation. So that is also interesting, right, in terms of how we frame power and how we understand power. Another way is visible, invisible, and hidden. Yeah, this is another way of seeing power. Visible refers to existing procedures and structures that are used by those in power to control the actions of others. And the comic is suggesting funding and how funding is funneled as a visible way of power dynamic, right? whatever gets funded gets obviously resources and gets much more developed than those items in the social and environmental agenda that don't get funded. Invisible is when people adopt belief systems, particularly negative stereotypes that are created by those in power. Yeah. And so in this comic, the idea is, you can see someone working really hard, pushing that block of hay, and what the person is expressing is, thank goodness I've got this job. It's all I'm good for. So this is the idea of, the unconscious ideas that we are planted in a way that suggest how we see the world and how power is exercised through that. Consumerism is a great example of this kind of invisible power, where we are suggested that we need to have certain material goods, buy from certain brands to, form an image of ourselves to the external world. And then hidden is about powerful people and institutions maintaining their influence by setting and manipulating agendas, marginalizing the voices of less powerful groups. And, language comes as a very clear one, or again, in a multi-stakeholder collaborative process, who gets to design the agenda, who holds the microphone. And we had this as a very strong experience in the case of Rwanda when we were designing a multi-stakeholder process, that typically, because of the power structures in society, there would be, in a group of 55 people that would take on the mic and wouldn't let it go. And so how do you bypass that? So we had to come up with ideas of using flip charts on the wall and post-its and different ways of gathering input from people that would bypass the holding the mic and not letting it go. All of these subtle things make up for how we design multi-stakeholder processes. How do we go about the work that needs to be done before, during, and after we run multi-stakeholder processes. I'm going to skip this slide for time purposes, but I'm happy to share more of this during our Signals of Change exercise. This is a clear example of how power is embedded in food systems across the Dutch food chain. And then, in terms of what can be done, there are some examples of practices that can be applied to organize more inclusive multi-stakeholder processes. So we talk about nested structures, using subgroups, feeding input into a larger group, as I gave that example of the Rwanda case. Facilitation is key, definitely. Multi-directional, so commitments to inclusion, being part of a network that can help with setting these inclusion goals, creating a roadmap, finding ways of bringing bottom-up decision-making. And other ways in which we do this is, for example, when we build the agenda for multi-stakeholder processes, having one-on-ones or interviews or sessions with different representatives bilaterally, so to really gather their insights. Online surveys also help. Mentimeter is a great tool for enabling anonymous participation of everyone. Agenda, as we said, participation in defining the agenda. Separate groups, sometimes they are needed, and this is a key insight as well. Power takes place within a cultural, and inclusion as well takes place within a cultural context. Some things we can bypass or we can address, and some things are so entrenched that need to be respected as well. So in cultures, and we discuss this a lot with our African colleagues, where there are some communities that have very specific power dynamics and hierarchies that are there to be respected, and people expect those hierarchies to be respected. So then you can use separate groups, meeting sizes and format. Sometimes large meetings are not conducive to inclusion. Smaller groups might be easier to manage in that sense. Quotas, 30% of attendees need to be from within this group, particular group. And then partisan MSP, that means that sometimes not all stakeholders need to be at the table for collective action to happen. So all of these are different, ideas. But we are now going to focus on looking at our own landscape teams and work much more in detail. And so for the purposes of time, we're going to take, I would say, 20 minutes in our breakout groups. So thank you, Courtney and Alex, for your support in setting those up. And what we are going to do is apply these ideas, start applying them, and look at how inclusion and exclusion might show up. What are the intrinsic barriers to inclusion and the potential mitigation actions? And we started the conversation earlier on about this. So now, focusing and zooming in on your own landscape, and look at power dynamics from a process and a personal self-awareness perspective. And for that, we've added some prompting questions, and we've created a template where facilitators and conveners in each breakout group are going to help moderate. One of us from the UNDP global team and Ibu Rini from Indonesia UNDP team, we're going to join the breakout groups to help with the note-taking. And then we're going to invite the ECA ambassadors and the team leads to very informally and organically, if you feel like doing so, sort of host the conversation as you are already normally doing in your own team settings. And obviously here we are going to be there to support in anything needed. But just feel free to host the conversation, moderate it, and help the colleagues from the landscape teams to share their inputs. This is how the template looks like for inclusion exclusion. And then in terms of working with power, we're going to offer some catalyzer questions, process perspective, what kind of power dynamics are present, where are the power imbalances present, how do they manifest? And from a self-awareness perspective, what happens in you, in me, when I see power dynamics playing out? What do I notice? What am I aware of? Am I intentional in how I respond? Am I visceral, reactive, impulsive? So again, bring awareness to your own individual process. Yes, Courtney, over to you.
Thank you. Just one comment and one question. One comment is that we have two wonderful observers, which will be with SECO. So we have Leah as well as Violette, and they'll be joining the breakout rooms as observers. So Violette will join GIZ, and I believe Leah will be joining Dimentor's breakout room. So just because we have 20 minutes, do you recommend we spend 10 minutes on this first slide and 10 minutes on that second one, just for...
Thank you so much, Courtney. And yeah, welcome, Violet and Leah. Yeah, I would say it's up to each landscape team to manage the time. If you want to just focus on inclusion because the conversation is powerful and you don't want to cut it, I would grant that possibility. If you want to split it in 10 and 10, that's also up to you. Yeah, I would say just whatever feels like powerful and helpful to each landscape team. But thank you for bringing the question up, because I think it's important for you to make an intentional decision there. So yeah, let's take, as we said, 20 minutes to do this work, and then we'll come back to plenary and reconvene. Thank you very much. And potentially the time to and the space, to do so. Yeah, and the spark of them being this lab sessions. I think it's a way of bringing our attention to how important these conversations are, and how do we create the spaces for them. So we've got a little less than 10 minutes to go. I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to move into closing. And let me just share. Yeah, we're going to skip the 2 minutes reporting for now, but I will ask you please to share your pulse check on where we are with this module and your feedback, so that we can gather that insight. We're going to take 5 minutes for that. And then I'm going to share the final closing points so that we can finalize the session on time. I'm conscious that it's late for you. So yeah, just take a few minutes, please. Use the Mentimeter. Thank you, Alex, also for sharing the link and the code. And yeah, we'll gather your insights. Once you've finished the survey, just make sure you raise your hand on Zoom so that we know that you've finalized. Thank you so much. For those of you who are filling out the survey, really appreciate your time and your input, because this is what helps us continue shaping the sessions moving forward to what's useful and helpful to you. And yeah, fantastic conversations. And this is why it's so important to have that continuation of the learning in between sessions, so that these conversations can continue and actually have the time and the space to go much deeper than obviously what we can in 2 hours every month. But I think it's a fantastic starting point. And just to close with what's next, we will liaise with the ECA ambassadors and the ECA team leads. As part of the UNDP support, we have a power expert that can provide power analysis and coaching sessions for each landscape team. So we can, again, look much more into the details of inclusion and working with power from the perspective of each landscape and the experience of each landscape. We've received already some on-demand coaching support and additional support. So that's fantastic to see. I think that's the way in which, as we say, we can continue the learning and the application of all of this. So keep it coming. Reach out to Courtney, Ibu Rini, Alex, and myself, and Nicola as well, of course. Remember that you have the peer coaching as a tool for connecting across landscapes if you wish to do so. And the use of the digital platform. Thanks, Alex, for sharing once again how we can connect to our SLPI group. And as we did before, ambassadors, we will connect with you separately. As of next modules, the idea is that we will share the materials in advance, translated to Bahasa, so that you can have a look at them prior to the session. And yeah, continue enhancing ways to make the materials accessible and the sessions useful and accessible to you. So with that note, thank you very much. And please feel free to leave us any comments or questions on the chat or over email if you need to go. Thank you so much, and see you in the in-between sessions and also in the next module.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good day.
Thank you
Good
all.
evening.
Bye.
Thank you.